It's been a great week, although every week's a great week. When you sit back and you focus on the things that God's doing for you in your life, you find that you have a lot of good weeks because God's a good God. And when you start to live a lifestyle where you can see God's work in your life, you tend to realize, man, it's a good week. It's a good day. Wow, some bad things happen today, but it's a good day. It's a good week. So that's why I always say that, is because I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what a bad day is. Or I'm just thankful things are as good as they are, even if they seem bad. Excuse me. So it's a good day. It's a good week. So, you know, there's good news out there since we're talking about good things. You know, you don't see a lot of it in the media, but if you look real hard, you can tend to find some. So some of the good news, I'm going to start with a few pieces of good news. So since the wall, the Mexican American border wall isn't being built, Trump's sending the military and the military down there to help be a wall, in a sense, to help protect the border. I think that's a smart move to send some people down there. He has a 51% approval rating, which I think is pretty cool. That's good, you know. He did sign a bad spending bill. It's a big spending bill. He did get funding for the military, which is good. But overall, I mean, that's not the direction we want to go. We really want to get the debt down, but you know, we can get there still. And there's 2 million plus jobs so far. That's awesome. Jobs are coming back. And with the new tax cuts, there is a lot of companies still giving bonuses, still making their programs for their employees better, giving them more benefits and stuff. And I think that's awesome. So a lot of good things are happening. Hopefully, everyone's beginning to see it. But this week, I really want to talk a little bit about the rights we have, the rights God gave us specifically, and the rights that are in that the founders used to basically write the documents they came up with. You know, the founders, they spent a lot of time in the Word. They knew the Bible. They studied the Bible. They were inspired by God. And some of the founding documents we have explain to us some of their thinking. So the Bill of Rights, for instance, was written in 1791. It was proposed by James Madison, and they were calling for a greater constitutional protection. They needed more than just the Constitution. They needed to specifically say what limitations the government had. So the Bill of Rights was inspired by the Virginia Declaration of Rights. And so John Adams, he wrote that the general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. He says, I will avow that I then believed and now believe that those general principles of Christianity are as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God. John Adams wrote that. So the principles of Christianity are what is in these documents. It's not necessarily line for line scripture, but it's principles. And they got these things from seeking the Lord and studying the Bible. And God's message is the same all the time. He never changes. His message is the same. His message and his wisdom applies all the time. So the Bill of Rights lists specific prohibitions or limits on governmental power. That's the important thing to realize, is the founders wanted government. Government is godly, but they wanted it to be limited. He didn't want them to just be able to run every aspect of everybody's lives like now. You can't even fish without paying a tax. That's not exactly what they were thinking about when they were writing about government. So the Anti-Federalist Party felt that a Bill of Rights was necessary to safeguard individual liberties. It's important, we got to remember, sorry about the camera shake, we got to remember individual liberties were important to our founders and back in the day. Nowadays, we look to a little more the good of everybody, but really they wanted each person to be protected to live his life how he wanted to, whether it was moral or not. There was a lot of morality back then, but if you didn't want to live that way, the government wasn't going to force you to unless you were hurting someone else. So, nowadays, there are people out there that believe that we should give up liberty for safety. That's not what the founders thought, and that's not what any of us should think. Personal safety is our responsibility. Why would we demand our rights to be removed and then give our right to protect ourselves to an individual, to someone else? That's just not good thinking. We have the right. I have the right to protect myself and my possessions and my family. And if I turn that over to somebody else, man, you're lost, because if they can't show up, or if the threat eliminates them, then what do I do? So it's our responsibility to not only be prepared to defend ourselves, but to be ready, be prepared, and pretty much take the assumption that it's on me. And if someone else can come help, great, but it's on me. So we have the right to defend ourselves and our property. The Constitution states that there are laws of nature and the laws of nature's God. They're a little different. And the founders understood the principles of science and the supernatural. Some of this, it was Benjamin Franklin. He was a scientist, He studied things, did things, you can read about that. But these guys just weren't some nobodies in a lot of cases. These were predominant, some of them lesser or more, people in the culture. And they also understood supernatural things, like George Washington understood some supernatural things, because during during one battle, he was shot several times and his coat had bullet holes in it, and he wasn't harmed at all. So there was a protection there. So the founders were men of experience in the Bible and in science. And talking about the laws in the Constitution, Bill of Rights, they're based on natural laws. And natural laws are laws that man can't change or destroy. They're things in nature that exist with or without our consent or control. Natural laws are a body of unchanging moral principles regarded as a basis for all human conduct. So natural laws are unchanging principles. Let's always remember that. They're a philosophy asserting that certain rights are inherent by virtue of human nature, endowed by nature, traditionally by God, but they're in nature, God put them there, and that these can be understood universally through human reason. Like, you can use laws like gravity, and the wind will move things sometimes. Like, man can't just say, well, we're going to ban wind, So if laws can be revoked or removed, it's not natural law, it's a conventional law. So conventional laws are laws which people who are subject to the law are in agreement with it and they want it. So any laws that people say, yeah, I think this should be a law, like robbing a bank or something, we agree that we shouldn't steal from each other, so we should make a law that you don't rob. That's conventional. And then they could at some point go, I think it's fine to rob, we can remove that law. Well, that is conventional law. So natural laws are things that are in nature. What's the word I want? Like a natural sense that things have, like protection, for instance, like an animal. There's a story of a kitten who used to go into the barn and crawl into the wool of the lamb and stay warm in the winter. Every night it would sleep there. And then the lamb grew up and had its own twins. And when the kitten would come to lay in there, well, guess what? The lamb's not having it, because the lamb now is protecting its children. And so it would try to butt off or kick that cat and kick it out, because my children come first. And it wasn't that it had an argument with the cat. It wasn't that it didn't like the cat anymore. It just had a sense of a natural instinct to protect what was its own. And that's a law of nature. And animals have it. You can see it in all kinds of, even domestic animals, that they're protecting their young. And if you ever come in contact with a bear with young, you will have an experience like that. If you see a bear in nature by itself without any young, chances are to run from you. But if it's got its kittens, or its baby bears with it, its cubs, then you could be in trouble. So just Think of things like that. These are the natural laws, forces beyond man's control, unalterable and unchangeable things like gravity. And so you can't really legislate it. Like Congress could make a law talking about like throwing a rock. If you throw a rock, it has to go up, it can't come down. Well, it's a waste of time. And I wouldn't be shocked if they tried to make a law like that. You know, a need for air is natural. You couldn't legislate that away because it's impossible. I hope the point's clear at this point. But like animals that protect themselves, that's self-preservation. That's a natural law. God put it there. Man can't change it. It's instinctual. And rarely do you see it broken except like in a miracle, typically, would be a situation where a natural law is broken. And there's a scripture in the Bible where an axe head, which those things are pretty heavy, a couple pounds, floated up from the bottom of a river. That's breaking natural law, and that would be a miracle. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about. And that's what the founders were talking about when they were talking about the Second Amendment specifically. We're talking about right now is the ability to protect yourself. It's not the government's job, it's your job.